Hey, women's hockey fans, Erica Lindsay Ayala here, bringing you more NWHL news. Today, the league announced a partnership with Megan Chaika and Stathletes for the 2021 NWHL season in Lake Placid. Here's a little bit of information from today's release. I jumped at the opportunity to work with a true pioneer in the sport in Megan Chaika. Analytics are an integral part of every major sports organization. We are proud to have the team at Stathletes providing industry-leading data for all games at the 1980 rink Herb Brooks Arena, giving our teams comprehensive reports and a higher level of information than ever before. From Megan, I'm thrilled to work on such an exciting tournament format with the NWHL. Women's hockey is on the rise, and my colleagues and I know that analytics will add another layer to this exciting event. And so that is the news. Stathletes and the NWHL will be bringing you data from the bubble. And so for those who are loyal listeners to the Founding Four podcast, first and foremost, thank you. But you know that I teased that this week I will be releasing my conversation with Mike Murphy. He's my co-founder of the Founding Four Pod, my former co-host, and of course, good friend who has been in the women's hockey analytics space for quite some time. Mike and I talked about his new endeavor, Her Hockey Counts. And so this news with the NWHL focused on analytics just is in perfect time with my conversation with Mike Murphy. So now you have the news, NWHL partnering with Stathletes, and here's my conversation with Mike Murphy. Man, what a special edition of the Founding Four podcast, as I am here with my co-founder and former co-host, Mike Murphy. How you doing, buddy?
I'm getting by, I think, as most people are just trying to do. You and I did a little catching up before we hit record, and we got to catch up with our families and everything. And I'm just stoked to be talking to you. Just hearing your voice, and I was like, oh man, where the hell has Erica been in my life? But I've just been following you, just doing what you do, hustling. Hardest working person I know in women's sports is Erica Ayala. So I am thrilled to be talking to you, but I'm doing well. Everyone in my family's healthy, so thank goodness for that. I hope everyone listening has had that much good fortune, and if not, I hope things get better soon. I know it's been just a year from I don't even know where, but not a good place, but we're all just trying to get by, and I think that's what I've been trying to do. I've been just trying to keep busy, spending way too much time in Google Sheets, but yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm awake.
All right. Well, you're here. I'm glad you're here. It's good to hear your voice. And we never really did this unless we were together. We didn't ever have the video component. So this is
we did it in this. I think we did it in the stands during that Champions Cup game,
yes,
where it was the Rivs and Luleå in Princeton, and it was just we were doing live commentary during the game. That was a hoot. That was a good time.
We were putting it together with, duct tape and bubble gum, as Dave Zirin likes to say.
Yeah, helped MacGyvering everything together.
Exactly. Yeah,
we have one mic. And we did it after a couple of Ribs practices and games, I think.
I'm like, that's Russo clanking it off the post, everyone. Yeah. I apologize.
You guys mind trying to steer an entire ship here? Yeah.
Oh, good times had by all. But we are here because you have a new project going on, which, everyone who's a longtime listener or honestly has ever heard me talk about you probably knows that I call you the Stats Man. Exactly. So we are definitely going to give the listeners and viewers a little taste of what you're doing. But first, Mike, we have to run through what's happening in women's hockey. Obviously, we talked about or alluded to coronavirus just really changing a lot of things, including, of course, the women's hockey slate. But I just want to get your thoughts, especially knowing that you're doing so much data tracking. What are you thinking about 2020, 2021 when it comes to women's hockey?
Well, I'm really, I keep thinking back on how this was going to be such a momentous year for women's hockey. Like what we saw at the 2019 Worlds with Finland upsetting Canada, and the building momentum of the PW and the N Dubs, and like oh, it's the Toronto Six. This is crazy. It's expanding, and then pump your brakes, kids. Everything that we were so excited about suddenly is stopping, and that was such a bummer. And of course, that doesn't even get into college hockey, doesn't even get into Europe and Russia and everything else. But we've heard so many discussions about the challenges of for the NFL and like what the WNBA has done is just like it boggles my mind. Like to me, they're the standard for how you respond to something like this. It's just unbelievable. And the challenges faced by women's sports, especially in women's hockey, where you have to count your pennies in the sport if you're running a team or an organization. And to see us come away with some success stories is honestly just such a welcome thing during this year, and such an encouraging thing, because damn, if this sport isn't resilient, like the people who care about the sport are just unbelievable people. And I know that just like I know that from interacting with people who you're just like, wow, we're gonna make it because we have enough people that are just, there's the Shelley Picards and the Haley Moores of the world, where you interact with them and you're just like, holy smokes, you're so smart and capable and doing the damn thing. So it's been a crazy year for women's hockey. And at first I was really negative about it. I was like, no worlds, no women's juniors, no U18, especially when they found a way to operate the U18 for boys and men's hockey.
Don't even.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, last year they had like a doorbell camera for those games.
Oh gosh, that seems like so long ago.
I know that was a problem when our problems were not like, oh yeah, there's a pandemic. But yeah, it's still, I think, an exciting time. And like we both know we're going to talk about the bubble and everything, but it's really fun to see us come away with positive stories in this time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, as you were running through things, I was like, oh my gosh, that really did happen. It seems like decades ago. But it's been, to your point, just such a trying time. And to your point about pinching pennies, women's hockey is always kind of finding ways to get it done. And it's interesting because when you said that, it was either Digit Murphy, Shannon Miller, or Gina Kingsbury. I talked to all three of them for a piece, actually, that I wrote for Lindsay Gibbs for Power Plays that I'm hoping will come out soon. But we were talking about that first Frozen Four, and also kind of looking ahead to what we're going through now, going through that women's hockey timeline. And one of them absolutely said, what I know for sure is that women's hockey is resilient. So I thought that was great that you said that. I mean, for any one of those women who had such an important part in the start of women's hockey history in very real and tangible ways, to kind of say that and that be their outlook, it's like, all right, I'm going with that.
Yeah, we'll hitch our wagon to the unbelievable trailblazers, the people who, laid down brick by brick where we've gotten to now. That is one of the reasons why I've gotten so, during this, like, I launched myself into the history of the women's game, because, like, there's so many just unsung heroes. Like, we need to give so much more attention to, like, the women who went above and beyond to make this happen. And make no mistake, like, it was women leading the way for women's hockey on and off the ice. And that is just something that, like, if you can't draw motivation from that and be like, you know what, PWNW, pandemic, all these headaches, it's like, you know what, there's enough people, we're rowing in the right direction. There's enough capable, amazing people that I really do have optimism. And I wouldn't still be driving myself crazy looking through old box scores. It didn't have the optimism.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And as you said, we're going to get to that all. But one of the people that I mentioned, Digit Murphy, has found her way to the National Women's Hockey League, and not just
Yeah.
in a leadership capability, but it was announced that, Digit is going to be the first head coach of the Toronto Six. We will have an NWHL season, but it will be single site and in a bubble, the N double, the Hubble. There's a lot of names.
I love the NW tag. It's perfect.
Yes.
We need
Okay.
shirts. We need flags. We need a lot of things. But yeah.
That's another vote for N double, folks. It just like phonetically works better than the actual W. I was like, Nwubble? I don't know.
No, N double. We say N dubs all the time, so N double's perfect.
N double's perfect. I will say I have enjoyed any variation of like snow globe or snow bubble as well.
You know what? I like that too. It's still very fun.
Correct. And I like NWHL or whomever else, feel free to steal this idea because I'm not a merch maker. That's not my gift. But I would buy an NWHL snow globe like yesterday. So.
Oh my God. I don't own a snow globe and I need one.
Neither do I, but now I need one. I need an N double snow globe.
Yeah, that's what I need in my life, is another random hockey thing to collect.
Completely. Yeah, I'm trying to find things like, things to do with these little tchotchkes that I have.
Yeah.
But
just put the Ribs bobblehead in a snow globe. You're more than halfway home. Yeah.
I'm saying, I'm just going to get a beach ball. I'm going to MacGyver it to our other
There you go.
And then I'll have my own little.
Yeah, we'll just do it at the stands of an abandoned rink to really bring it back to full nostalgia mode.
That's it. Oh my goodness. But let's talk a little bit about this single site, Lake Placid. You want to talk about history? So the obvious history for hockey fans is the Miracle on Ice 1980 Olympics. But what I've really enjoyed also since the announcement that the NWHL would be playing at, I always want to say Herb Carnegie, but that's not his name. That's another hockey guy.
Yeah.
Herb Brooks Arena. Since the announcement, you've seen players like Blake Bolden and other players throughout the NWHL who went to school in that area, in the Lake Placid area, just recounting their memories of playing on that particular sheet of ice. And of course, we know that USA Hockey, through their development camps, has been there in the past as well. So just your overall thoughts about that historic moment in hockey history, and now the NWHL hoping to get their 2021 season off on that same sheet of ice.
Yeah, it's fun. I talked to the head coach of the Team USA 1990 Women's Worlds team in my effort to do some history stuff, and he mentioned that the first Team USA for any IIHF event practiced at Lake Placid. So there's even more women's hockey history there, which is really cool. But I was pretty skeptical that the league could kind of put something together. And frankly, that was just because everyone has a side gig or a full-time gig on top of doing hockey. And then you have even getting into the nitty gritty of oh crap, what about insurance and health insurance? Would that cover this when they're going to be exposed to something that's so unique, and would players be willing to risk it? And I didn't really have the creativity to imagine essentially just doing a tournament, like a world's tournament where, and that's one of the reasons why I'm there's enough smart people running things. Cause I didn't kind of suss out in my brain how they could make it work. But, I really like the idea. I'm one of we get hockey. Okay. Is it, pretty short season? That's a bummer, but can't complain. And I like that there's enough hockey where I think the teams will have enough time to kind of shake off the rust, get into gear. We already know the teams are practicing, which is good. And I like the idea that we're going to have this frenzy, right? It's going to be a 2-week. We're all going to be panting at the end of it, what the heck just happened? But we're going to get it. It looks like, honestly, the NWHL's plan looks like it's on steadier footing than the NHL's plan, which speaks volumes about everything, I guess we could say. But the fact that they're going to get paid full salaries is unbelievable. The fact that if they opt out, they get the full salary is awesome. And I think a lot of credit should go to Anya Packer for a lot of things. But this is like, if you have another takeaway here, this is like a huge, unbelievable achievement for the PA in the NWHL, getting able to do all this. And also 95% of the players being down for this is, I mean, it looks like we're going to have hockey, Erica. It looks like we're going to have an NWHL season.
I know, it's really exciting. And I remember back in the summer when the NWHL announced that the season would not start until 2021. And I had a conversation, and you mentioned her earlier, Shelly Picard. And I was having this conversation, and I was like deep into Zoom fog at the time.
Yeah.
You know, like my brain was not working properly. And I remember having this and I never used the audio because I was like, oh my gosh, I sound like a zombie. And I remember saying, to Shelly, I was like, wait, so like, how is this working? Like, are you traveling? Like, is it going to be single site? She's like, no, Erica, like we're going to be in market. I was like, wait, so you're not going to be in a single site? Like, I think it was just that, like, between covering and being so deep into the wobble, the WNBA wobble, and seeing the NWSL, I was just like, wait, what do you mean you're traveling?
Well, because everyone had a different model and a different idea. So when you hear these like things, you're like, hold up a minute, wait, is there a snow globe? Like, it's a lot.
That's all I need to know. Like, I really had to ask her multiple times. I was like, wait, explain this to me one more time.
Walk me through it.
Yeah. And then it turns out that we are getting a bubble. So, but I think a lot of what you said is how I feel. It's sometimes really tough to get excited about sports, even though you want to be excited about sports.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much going on. I do hold out hope because the NWSL had no positive tests. The WNBA, even though they had an inconclusive test, they had a few, including in the semifinals. They postponed a game just to make sure they got it right, and it turned out that they ended the season. Congrats to the Seattle Storm and the Houston Dash, I should say, in the NWSL, but both of those leagues got through with no problems. What worries me is that though I feel like we're so far removed from that time period, like that immediate focus, that we have seen positive cases in NCAA, certainly in women's basketball, in football. We've seen them in the NFL. As you mentioned, the NHL is kind of trying to figure out what they're going to do. It sounds like the NBA is going back to arenas. And, you know, it's hard to imagine that a lot of that's not run by the economics of sports. From a very basic bottom line perspective, makes sense, but it's just so crazy to hear that folks are willing. It's like, you know, it's like, oh, well, we're going to have positive tests. I'm like, I'm sorry. Didn't we all go into shutdown because that's not what we wanted? Now we're just like, oh, there's going to be positive tests, so deal with it. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things you want to be excited, but you also, you know, like watching, you know, football every once in a while, like some stadiums have fans and some don't. And like in college football, watching Notre Dame fans rush the field, and you're just like, guys, this is why we can't have the nice things, because no one acts responsibly. And you know, there's no fans in the N double, and that's a good thing. But you know, you still have to have pause, right? You still have to say, you know, there's going to be testing. You know, how much thing is there, and all the deep, like all the nitty gritty stuff is all being worked out. But you know, we talking about the NWHL and covering it for as long as we did. And, you know, I worked there last year in the content department, and we've talked a lot about transparency. And I think that the league is going to be they're really welcoming a microscope ahead of this N double. And that's something that I think they knew going in. And they're going to have to operate really, really well under this microscope, because There are plenty of people who are detractors, or they're looking for the sensationalist headline of, look how they dropped the ball here. And
Yeah.
that's what they're welcoming, but they're also welcoming having hockey for fans who are desperate for hockey. And, the players, the vast majority of the players want it. It's like, the coaches, the GMs all want it. And it is, I have that thing like you. It's like, we're willing to accept the risk for, at the end of the day, this is an entertainment product. It's not, This isn't nurses on the front line. This isn't people delivering food. This isn't people, making sure people get what they need. And a lot of people would say, oh, but we need these things. We need these things to keep us sane as a society and all that. And that's like a whole other can of worms to open another time. But, you have to appreciate the thought and the effort that's going into this. I do just have my fingers crossed that we don't have any, oh, there was an outbreak or anything else, because, we already know teams go into lineups, like it's not the same as men's hockey. They play with essentially less forward line. And so if some of these teams, like I wrote something for TIG, where I think right now Toronto only has 17 players signed. If they have to quarantine a player or something, what are they going to do? Like, they're going to play 3 or 4 defenders in a game, and that's just like the hockey side of things, let alone the human side of things, which is so much more important. And that's the state of all this. But I didn't think we'd be having it. And so far, just like, I'm not an infectious disease expert. I'll say that. I'll put that on Front Street, but it seems to be in a good, it's being done goodly, I guess. I don't know. We don't have all the details, but we'll see how everything shakes out, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And I know the Victory Press is among those that have really kind of posted a lot of questions about what the testing will look like. And of course,
fair questions.
Yeah, absolutely fair questions. And that stuff does matter. I believe it was Dan Rice that reported that there have already been some positive tests in the NWHL. So that's not information that the league has released or any particular team has released. But we both know how hard Dan Rice works, and I mean, his sources are lock solid. So I have no reason to believe, and would, if I were a betting woman, would bet money that, Dan's getting that from a good place and would never knowingly put out something, especially about coronavirus. So, it just really makes you wonder what's going on. But even the other things that you mentioned, again, covering the wobble, the WNBA season, it was a lot. And there won't be as many games. One team in the WNBA will have just about as many games overall as the NWHL will have. So there were a lot more games. But it's a really compact season. I just know what it was like from a journalist perspective. But when you introduce also, I was asking these questions for the wobble. What happens if a player is injured? You are saying protocol is to have 14 days of quarantine altogether before entering the wobble. What does that leave you as far as being able to find a replacement player? I mean, are there going to be players that are kind of available and on call? Is Haley Moore going to suit up again?
Yeah.
These are all questions.
Those are important questions to ask, because we have to, if this gets done at the end of the day, it has to be done right. It has to be done safely. It has to be done in a way where the risk is minimized and where everyone can feel like we're not just like putting something together that puts our athletes at needless risk. Of course, there is just going to be risk, period, because you're going to have gatherings, and hockey is a sport where, thinking about the NHL season and covering the NHL over a blue shirt banner, like I think of one of the worst places in the world just to watch is a hockey bench. Just all the spitting, all the sharing of water bottles and everything. And you're like, this is just bad. Right, for something like COVID. And you think about, I remember like a doctor for the NHL was saying, we might ask players not to spit. And I was like, yeah, that'll solve it.
I think the MLB was on that too. And I'm like,
That's our big breakthrough.
Right.
But yeah, but those are all important questions. Like, if there's an injury, is there a reserve player? What sort of protocol goes there for testing for that player? I know Leotis was kind of responding to some of the points raised by the Victory Press, and she would know, as I like to say, as one of those people who wears lab coats and is very smart. But these are all questions we need to ask, and I think we need to continue to ask. And we can ask them while being excited. And I think that's where the right headspace to have is like, oh, goody, maybe we're going to have some N-dubs hockey, but let's still make sure everything is on the up and up and people are safe and it's done the right way.
Right. Exactly. So I wanted, before we move on, and this will be a way of transitioning to the big conversation that I want to have with you, Mike, but I'm not sure if you are familiar, but the Challenge Cup stats for the NWSL did not count towards the overall tally for NWSL players. And I'm just dying to know, as someone who really dives into the stats, like, how you feeling about that one, Mike?
It's so like I don't mean to bring it back to the NHL just by default, but like the NHL had a similar thing with, like, they had a play-in thing before the playoffs, which sounds like it might be what the N-Dub's going to do. And like, so what do we call those games? And like, I like to be a little sneaky and be like, well, anything that happens after the regular season is the postseason. So we can call it the playoffs. And so that is what my brain is going to do. And if anyone is going to tell me that the regular season of the N-Dubs doesn't count towards players' overall stats or the playoff stats, I will just disagree and do my own thing. Because my whole thing is, hold up, it happened. And it mattered. These games were of consequence. These achievements happened, goals, these assists happened, like, in the MWSL, like, this happened. We can't dismiss it. And there was, at the end of it, there's hardware. So we definitely can't dismiss it. And a lot of that stuff is so important to me because there's been a history in women's sports where things like stats were just not important, and doing things like making sure history is recorded is not important. So I think we need to take the opportunity, even if you want to put a little asterisk and say, just so you know, this wasn't a normal season or anything, go ahead. But when we look at, like, career stats and stuff, just say in all games, this is what this player did. Covers every base imaginable, except you can be like, what about exhibition games? And then I'll be like, those don't count.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, Mike, it's important to let folks know that her hockey counts.
Oh! Queen of transitions, still in the game.
I'm still in the game. That stat counts, undefeated, always. But
I don't even need to count those ones.
I did want to, I know that's been your philosophy. I was very curious because I didn't know where you would land on that. I'm sure there's like a data reason why people would want to put that to the side. But for me, I'm like, a point is a point is a point is a point, right? So, but.
And we can learn, the big thing with data, not to interrupt you, is if you can learn from the data, then we should record the data. And that is data we can learn from. Is it a different setting? Of course it is. But like a good example is the N-Dubs. Like, one season we had 18 games. The next season we had 15 games. The next season we had 14 games. We even had a season where different teams had different amounts of regular season games. Mm-hmm. Does that mean we throw out that season? No. The games happened. The stats happened. Sometimes players miss games. Do we throw out a player's stats because they missed a game? Of course not. We just need to record everything. That's the boring part and the part that gives everyone a headache. Record everything and make sure you make the distinctions. This is this is that.
Right. And since I've known you, Mike, I've known that on your own time, on the side, you have been putting together stats and you have been trying to, again, make her hockey count. I mean, the presentations that you've done, the conversations that you have, what you write about the importance of data. And I know I've told this to you before. Anyone who's listened to the podcast, when I talk about numbers knows, like, I'm like, not my vibe, not my thing. But I understand how important they are. And when it comes to, you talked about the Ice Garden. Obviously, you and I have both in the past, I've in the past worked alongside you at the Ice Garden. But I love when the Ice Garden focuses on, I love to hate, I should say, when the Ice Garden focuses on like just, and just gets so upset about there not being women in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I wonder if part of the reason is because we think of women's hockey in a very specific way. And so if we're not counting NWHL stats, if we're not counting PWHPA stats, if those stats are not available, then how can you make a case for someone like a Kelly Babstock when it's her time to be eligible? Because she's never played in an Olympics. She's never played at a world championship. And so I think even from a stats perspective, the pool is already small because, women, but now you make it even smaller when you only think of women's hockey in essentially two very distinct ways. And that's two international tournaments.
Yeah, and it's so funny you say that because her hockey count started with me just, just putting up all the stuff that I had done. And then I started working on, I wanted to work on kind of historical stuff. And I was writing an article about just how good was Haley Wickenheiser, and just how good was Angela James. And Angela James led me to looking at elite prospects, and some of the data was missing for her. And I was like, well, that's just, I can't sleep anymore. How do we not have all of Angela James' stats? And then because I asked that question that you asked, which is an important one, because in the world of the Hockey Hall of Fame on the men's side, it's a Hockey Hall of Fame not just for the NHL, but you have your international tournaments, but then you have your success largely achieved in the NHL. So there's something of a standard, right? You have greatness in terms of production or awards, individual accolades, and then longevity. Players get a lot of credit for longevity. And in women's hockey, longevity might look like you played until you're 28. And then you have the issue of there being multiple leagues that you could play in. And then you have some of the best women playing in men's leagues. And then you have all these other things what about a player who's in youth sports? What about a player who took the path of the NCAA? What about all these amazing women who played before there was women's college hockey? And they were still among the very best players in the world. And that all led me to looking at the historical data and really being listen, we at least need goals, assist points for skaters and saves and shots against for goalies. That was my bottom line. We need to do this so we can say, why isn't this player in the Hall of Fame? And that all started with me with Angela James because I couldn't find her stats. And that to me was just that's criminal to me. That's someone that important. In the first class, her and Cami Granato, the first two women in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And such an important player, in terms of her influence on the game and as an inspiration, one of the most important people in the Hockey Hall of Fame, period. And we don't have all of our stats on something like elite prospects. And we don't have that information readily available. So we can be this is what Angela James did back in the day. And now look at this young player and what she's doing, and we can compare them. It's such a simple thing to me that we take for granted in men's sports and men's hockey. And that is what kind of got me so passionate about this is I just kind of cracked my knuckles and I was here we go. Stuck inside anyway, let's do it. So that's what I've been up to. But I agree with you completely. It makes it really hard. For an example, you said, someone like Kelly Babstock is, how do we compare her directly to someone who played exclusively in the C-dubs, or all the women who went over and played in Europe, someone like Kira Dosdal-Arena, who played a little bit in Europe. Do we dismiss her stats from Europe? Well, it's part of her story. All these, everywhere you play, part of your story. And so many of these women have had to blaze their own trail to find a post-collegiate career. And in a lot of cases, that happens with women who were really, really damn good, but maybe not on the national team. And then you get into the, oh, well, if they weren't on the national team, there's so much politics and bullshit involved in the national team. Sorry, I forget if you operate blue or
I'll
not.
just put the E on there. We're fine.
Okay. But, you know, like one of my favorite examples is like Blake Bolden. You're trying to tell me Blake Bolden isn't one of the best hockey players, not only of her generation, but like she wasn't on the national team. You know, and I could say that for a lot of players, but Blake Bolden is my favorite example because, like, did you see Blake Bolden play? Because I saw her play, and she was unbelievable. Anyway, I know I've been on a rant, but this has been my life for the last 8 months
I
or
love
something.
it. Well, that's why we want you on here. That's why we want you to talk about, you know, her hockey counts. Again, I know that you're so into stats. You're always been the stats man for me. But what I love for you, because Mike, you know, these are things that you likely will never say out loud, but I know how much work goes into this for you, not just to put the numbers together, because like that alone would take me forever, but then you make them look pretty and you make them make sense. You made, you know, your own, you know, basically a data point, the steady, which is freaking fantastic.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
fun.
and so I'm really excited for you because now you have not just, you know, a brand, but also people that can support and that absolutely should support your work. So I'm just so happy and proud of you, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah, you're gonna make me emotional because you know I'm a absolute teddy bear. Like I'm a Ziploc bag full of tears that you're poking with a needle. But yeah, it is something that is like I needed something like this to distract me during this to keep sane, and I wanted to find something that was kind of worthwhile because I know it doesn't come as a shock to you, but for someone who depends on like freelance work for income and to keep busy, it kind of disappeared with the pandemic, and so I needed something to really throw my energy into. And well, like once I came across that thing with Angela James, and like I was making a sheet, like just how like because I wanted to know like what's the gold standard for getting to the Hockey Hall of Fame, even though apparently we have this cap of 2 women a year, and then we don't do it, which is also just a wonderful thing. But and like I wanted to ask, like I just want to know. It's like you know I was 4 years old when the first World Championship was going on, and I only was really following women's hockey when I finally got into it at Sochi, and then I didn't like when the NWHL rolled around. It was in my backyard. I was like, let's do it, and I say this all the time to people because I think it's important, and I don't say this to be humble or modest. I'm not a math person. I'm not someone who looks at numbers and I just get them. I'm just someone who's putting time into this. And I think that is something that is valuable to learn. I've actually, in my own professional life, I've had opportunities because I've put time and energy into this. And that's, I think, an important lesson for people who are interested in working in women's hockey as media. If you put time and energy into it, and you know, you're not doing this to get rich, as you know, Erica. We're not doing this. We're not doing this to make sure we have a place to park the yacht. But you know, we do it because we care. It's something it resonates with us, and these are stories that we look around and we're like, why aren't people telling these stories? F it, I'm gonna tell the story. And that's kind of how I got here. But it is important, and I know I downplay, like I don't pay attention of, oh, Mike's working so hard, isn't his work important? Because I curl up like, you know, like a dead bug left out in the sun. But you know, it is a lot of work, and it's rewarding though, because like just yesterday I was able to tweet out like what Brianna Decker's all-time stats were for Women's World Championship. I haven't gotten to the Olympics yet. I'm gonna get there, maybe. But I did the world's first because I knew it was harder. There's so fewer Olympics, which is great. There's only a couple of them. But like being able to just say, this is what her points per game was. Just something as basic as that. I can say reliably, this is how many goals she scored. only one of them was an empty netter. Like, this is what her
Jeez.
average shots per game was. And like, yeah, I had to go through every single one of Brianna Decker's games and every other player's games. But it's really worthwhile, I think, because to me, it's preserving history. That's the way I look at it as someone who loves history.
I love it. And as a writer, obviously, these are amazing things to be able to have as an analyst and a broadcaster, to be able to have that. And I mean, I did see that you put out those Decker stats, and man, just I could go on an entire rant, and I have, about how just criminally undervalued I believe Brianna Decker is to the WoHo community. But now
Oh,
I
yeah.
can do that and have the stats to prove it.
Yeah.
One empty net goal in her entire career. Come
Yeah,
on.
the rest were earned the hard way, as I like to
Come
say,
on. And I believe
with the
that.
goalie.
Just the
Yeah.
eye test, that passes the eye test.
Yeah. And like just before, it's a player I know you and I have interviewed together a bunch and talked about, like, I just finished Erica Lawler's stats.
Oh, God.
And getting to look at, like, oh, Erica Lawler, people forget that she was really good for Team USA, and being able to say, in 20 games, she had 13 points and 6 of her 10 assists were primary, which makes a lot of sense because she's a playmaker and a half. And, being able to be like, look, this is Erica Lawler's stats. This is what she achieved in this setting. And just we can't resist. And because I know it will make Erica Lawler laugh, I'm also making note of every player's height. So
Small.
I've got, yeah, small, SMOL. Yeah. But yeah, she's not the smallest player ever in World Championship history. There's a player in Japan who was 4'9".
Wow.
So that is
That's
officially
wild.
small.
But I
I
mean,
think
I love
6'2" is
that.
the tallest.
Because to your point, you talked about Angela James and Blake Bolden, but I mean, how many people just didn't realize what a true honor and a privilege it was to watch Erica Lawler skate and to
Yeah,
watch her
and
play?
it was one of my favorite stories covering the NWHL, to be honest, is this player who was excellent, very good, to the point where she's in the top handful of the best players in the world when she was active. And then, like, when she came back to the River, she's like, oh yeah, I haven't skated in a couple of years. And so now I'm giving this a whirl. And we got to watch her fall in love with the game again. And we got to see these little flashes of, like, wow, that was a play. And damn, she skates quick when she wants to. And you get this, like, these stories, and you get to put these pieces together. That's the fun thing for me, is coming across all these names I'm familiar with. And, someone like Shelley Picard, who was a part of Team USA and then didn't make a team. And then, she came back. She kicked some more butt. And getting to look at, like, yeah, why did she ever not make a team? Or someone like Alex Carpenter not making, the Olympic roster. It's
Dear.
what's going on here?
Bozak, like, come on.
Yeah.
That's just
Like, what's
what are we
going
doing?
on? Yeah. And being able to tell those stories and just to be like, this is what this player did, and how you can tell part of the story. It doesn't tell the story of who they are as an athlete or who they are as a person, of course, but it tells part of their hockey story. And that's a fun thing, like, to have. It's the reason why I make it like a free public resource, is I want everyone to be able to look, like, any young girl out there who's like, how good was Angela James? And, like, look it up and be like, damn, she was good. Like, that to me is all the feel goodies I need to keep working on it.
And so you've kind of talked a little bit about your process, and that you started with Worlds, going to get to the Olympics. But, I'd love for you, Mike, to just tell listeners and viewers, if you could draw up on that magic whiteboard that I like to talk to Anya Packer about, what would be that future? What are some of the goals that you have for her hockey counts, or how her hockey counts can facilitate some of the things that you'd like to see just in women's hockey, period?
Well, I think a big thing I'll say, and I've kind of hesitated to say this on social media, but I'll say it on your show because I think it's important. The bottom line is that I've heard from multiple sources that the IIHF just doesn't give a single about women's hockey, and specifically its stats. I've also learned that the IIHF's office is in Switzerland, and they had a flood. And in this flood, a lot of these stats just went underwater because it was all paper documentation.
Wow.
And it's gone.
Wow.
And that's the other reason why I am being like, you know what, someone's got to do it. And they're certainly not going to do it. I wrote a story about the 1990 Worlds, and Alyssa Longmuir, who's really doesn't get enough attention for all the work she does in women's hockey analytics and data. She reached out to the IHF being like, hey, we need some of this old data. And they literally linked her to my story, being like, someone wrote about it, maybe this is it.
Wow.
And that sort of stuff is the sort of stuff that just makes you hang your head. And so what I hope is that, like, I don't do this to shame the IHF, but I do this to kind of draw attention to the fact that these things don't exist in a public resource, and that's bonkers to me. It doesn't make sense to me that people haven't made women's hockey a priority, and they, like, especially in an organization like IIHF, where it's like, we have men's hockey and women's hockey. You don't need to look at it long to see which one they care about. And this is a story, I've talked to a lot of people who were tournament organizers for Women's World Championships. I've talked to coaches over the years, just like bothering everyone I can. Like I have like old, like they recorded it with an old, remember those old VHS recorders, those tape recorders where it's like dads and uncles, like, and moms too, but it's mounted on your shoulder. And you have a microwave on your shoulder just from the stands. Like, it's our kid's first play. We're going to record it and put it on a VHS tape. Like, I have recordings of the first Worlds of that quality, which is like, that's amazing and awesome. But it's also like, why weren't we recording this better? Like, why wasn't there more done? And so that's what I hope, is that whenever I get burned out or whenever anything like this happens, like someone else will kind of pick up the torch. But the thing that's encouraging to me, Erica, is that already in the past couple of years, I've seen more people get into the data. And when I put the data out there, I have analysts and data visualization people who I don't know how they do their fanciness, but like I've tried to learn Tableau and I do very basic stuff and I feel good. It's like someone's like, I painted the Mona Lisa, and I'm like, look, I have MS Paint. But seeing people like Nayant Patel, and they come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're doing this important work. And he just did a presentation about the difference between zone entries in collegiate men's and women's hockey, and we learned that you have a higher percentage chance of skating through the center of the ice with the puck. Women's hockey players have more success going through the middle of the ice. Why does that happen? There's no body checking, which means like how important is skating to women's hockey? It's more important than it is in men's hockey. No one talks about that because there's not enough data, and we're building that data now, and that's awesome. You want a reason to watch women's hockey? Skating's more important. It's it's the foundation of ice hockey is skating, and that sort of stuff to me, I just love. Another fun stat from his presentation is there's 4 passes on average before a goal is scored in women's hockey. In men's hockey, there's 2.58 or something. Passing's more important. It's a team game in women's hockey. It's a tactical team game. You win as a team. How perfect and awesome is that?
I love that. I love that.
That's all the reasons why I fell in love with the game in the first place. It's like, yeah, we don't need hitting. Not having hitting makes it better in a lot of ways. And like, you can say, oh, I don't know about better. It makes it different in a good way. It changes the flow of the game. And it makes the ability to control the puck better. And I know I'm going off right now, sorry, but
do it.
It's so fun to have that like data and to present it and to study it and be like, look at this. I honestly look at it. And I think that's the thing in the greater hockey community that not enough fans have done, is they haven't taken a moment to appreciate what women's hockey is and what it can offer. And I know I don't have to tell you what it is and what it can offer, but it's really, really rewarding to see people be like, wow, this is cool, Mike. I'm going to do something with this data. And I'm like, go do what else you need, please. Because I'm not just doing this to feel good. I want this to make a difference. And, I read the story about like, someone at OSU saw some of the work I was doing and they got into data analytics at OSU. It's like, holy bleep.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories by Allison for sure. Luke and I think I sent that to you. I was like, oh my gosh, there's my buddy right there in the story. I mean, because what you are doing is important, and I'm so thankful that I got a front row seat for a little bit there, seeing the work.
You always have your seat if you want it. I'll just bother you like I always need to.
Yes.
Hey, look, more things.
Let's do all the things always. But I mean, the work that you're doing is so important. And the thing I love about that story from Allison is that, it shows into, a new coach, how she's trying to revive an OSU program. That, I mean, some of the things that Coach Muzzerall told me about coming into OSU and the hockey program, I was like, no way, like, just like, what is happening? But in a short time, she's been able to really make a mark, to the point that Ohio State University, they won the WCHA last year. I mean, that's just, it's fantastic. And at least in part, being able to have data, having numbers, like you said, like when I tell you to skate up the middle, this is why I tell you to skate up the middle,
you'll have
things
more
like
success.
That. Yeah. Exactly. And, it also, of course, I am a firm believer that sports, anything that you do physically, has to be about feel. You don't want to push things. But if you know in the back of your mind a success rate, and if you see that opportunity and that option, then you start to train your mind and thus your body to react immediately when you see those things open. And I think that makes for, especially for players, and you have to be a cerebral player, I would argue, and an elite level. I mean, that just elevates the game. And then for me, I love defense. I love like good, solid defense. As a person who loves to study defense, that means that now defenders, if they know that this information is out there, and hopefully, again, it becomes a standard and not just something that a program like OSU is doing, then that's always the challenge for a defender is, I know that they know what I know.
Yeah.
Now, what do I do to stop them?
Yeah, it's the ultimate game of chess is when you bring analytics into it. And that's what makes it so fun. It makes me think about talking, like when I got to work in the N-Dubs last year, I got to experience firsthand players just like emailing me, like, just so you know, I got an assist on that one goal. And I'd be like, I got you. I know. I was watching. And I'm not going to name any names, but one of them is Kaylee Fratkin. But I got a lot of those emails, and it was cool to me because I learned they pay attention. They know these things.
Correct.
Like I remember a couple of years ago when I was doing, I was live tracking USA Canada, and I was just like, this is the team Corsi for each game. And someone asked me like, what's Corsi mean? On Twitter, like Anya Packer responded to that person and explained it perfectly because I was busy tracking the game, and I was like, oh, they know exactly what's going on. And of course they do. They're passionate about it. It's part of, how they look at the game. I think about a conversation I had with Jillian Dempsey a couple of weeks ago, where like face-offs, something that's interesting to me because I think face-offs are important, especially in the offensive zone. But analytically speaking, they don't influence puck possession much. And Jillian Dempsey said all those things to me, but she also said, but I still work on my face-offs because I know that if I'm winning more face-offs, my team tends to win more. And the underlying numbers, like you look at what Boston did last year, yep, that is what happened. Boston won like an absurd amount of their face-offs last year. And they especially got a lot of goals off of winning a face-off in the offensive zone, especially on the power play. Torrey Sullivan was amazing at it. Someone who stood out to me is like, win a face-off, create a play, bang, bang, goal. And you can't tell me that face-offs aren't important, and you can't tell me the players aren't aware of it. And that's so fun to me when you add a couple more pieces to the chessboard, right? Where it's adds another layer to everything.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic. And the thing that I love about everything that you just said is that you can be a casual fan of almost any men's sport and be able to easily access all of that.
Yeah.
As a
It's at your
women's sports,
fingertips. Yeah.
exactly, as a women's sports fan, you definitely don't have that. And you're lucky if you have it as a player, if you have it as a program or a team, you're lucky.
Yeah. You're
And
really
just,
lucky. Yeah.
think about the type of world that we live in, where everything, we want it at the touch of a fingertip. And so much of conversations, especially now, right, are happening digitally. Even if you're not down with the numbers, if you want to make a case for the growth of women's hockey, you have to make people want to talk about it. And I know a lot of people are trying to make that argument for gambling. Like I mentioned in passing, I'm really just not into the gambling. It's not my vibe. Maybe
I don't
that's
gamble.
because,
Yeah.
it's the numbers. I'm just like, nope, I'm going to keep my money because I know how to
Yeah.
count to that much. but I think that's the case that gambling is trying to make, to get into the sports space and to make that
Yeah.
less of a stigma. I feel sorry for you, Pete Rose. I'm thinking about you all the time.
Ooh. Ooh.
I know, controversy. Let's not talk about baseball controversies. That'll be
Yeah.
another 40
All I
minute
need to mention
podcast.
is the DH2.
DH. Oh,
Yeah.
come on.
We've had
Oh,
multiple heated conversations with Erica about the
come
DH. And
on.
honestly, at first I was ambivalent, but now I'm like, you know what? She's right. And then you're like, of course I'm right. I know I'm right.
I said it, didn't I? But I mean, but the point, right? That the point is that sports fans, sports culture, these conversations happen. And we need this for all
Yeah.
women's sports, but we definitely need this for women's hockey. The ability to have somewhere to go, which of course is Her Hockey Counts, be able to pull up these analytics, have a conversation, or, tweet at Her Hockey Counts and be like, hey, what does this mean? What is it? Because I'm trying to, smash this troll that's telling me that Brianna Decker is not the best active player right now. So I need you to shuffle those stats over my way. Just things like that. They make people invest. They make people excited. They make people find their favorites, even when, different ad accounts or whatever the case is telling them that they should focus on this. And that's what makes people love sports and love sports culture. There's really some good that comes out of that. So I mentioned it in passing. We have the Patreon page. We're going to link that for this episode. But where are some other places, Mike, that you're finding ways to put out this information, which you already said that you're making sure is publicly available?
Yeah, so everything is going to be on herhockeycounts.com. My patrons will get stuff earlier, just because that's the way I want to reward them. And, I'm implementing a lot of my work into some stuff I've done at the Ice Garden. I've done kind of a series. It's called Rewind, where I'll look at an older Women's World Championship and I'll look at the data, because I just spent a week or two looking at it all, and then I'll come away with a story. And one of my favorite ones was USA's first gold they won. They won it in a tournament where Canada didn't allow a goal in regulation or overtime, but they finished with a silver medal because they lost in a shootout in the gold medal game. Imagine not allowing a goal in an entire tournament and you come home with silver. That's gotta suck. That's not what I wrote in the story, which it hasn't gone up yet. But really, that's the too long didn't read version of it. That's gotta suck. But yeah, that's a fun place to look at some of the work. I also a lot of the stuff I've worked on in terms of I looked at the development and aging curves and things like that of collegiate hockey players. I've written over at Hockey Graphs. I'm a contributor there. Alyssa also has some great work over there. So they do have some really cool women's hockey analytics articles there at Hockey Graphs. So definitely, if you're interested in that, you can check it out. And other than that, every once in a while I'll tweet something out on Twitter, but I've tried to make an effort to make the home for my stuff Her Hockey Counts, because it used to be just, Erica, here's a link to this Google sheet I made. You can share it with anyone in media who needs it. And by the way, I have 400 of these Googles, and I realized maybe I should put this all in one place. So that's how everything got to where we got to.
I love it. I love it. Again, we're going to make sure to have all of the links available.
Thank you.
I look forward to using a lot of this information more regularly. And, we talked about the bubble, don't know who's going to the bubble, but I do hope that they are able to find a way to broadcast. And, just a reminder that Eric is available.
Hey!
Hey. But, honestly, though, another thing that we saw when it came to women's sports with coronavirus happening is that actually women's sports were able to increase the number of games that they had nationally televised. And then people tried to make stats arguments as to, but the pandemic is why people were watching more. I was like, okay, then why did the men's numbers go down? And they were like,
Well, then why did the numbers stay up the whole time?
Yeah, exactly.
You're telling me they didn't get bored of the women's sports? That's funny.
That's wild. But also,
Is that some bullshit coming out of your mouth? I'm sorry.
A lot of men's sports fans, I'm not going to call them men, although my eye test tells me they tend to skew that way, but men's sports fans who don't understand and appreciate women's sports oftentimes like to make the argument, well, those numbers are nothing compared to men. The whole argument, though, is that the numbers exponentially increased. Why? Because there were more nationally televised games. So although I would love to announce and be part of the media for the N double, I would also absolutely love to see the NWHL be able to elevate and get these games out in a wider breadth and have a bigger catchment area, because again, we've seen
or put them on ESPN, and then ESPN hires Erica.
I am okay with that as well.
See, that's the other plan that I'm a big fan of. Is like we can have both, Erica.
Let's do it, right? Why limit ourselves? Why
say one or the other when we can have both? But that is an argument I love. Is like, look, when I don't water this plant and I water this one plant all the time, and I only water this plant some of the times, this plant's bigger. And it's like, yeah, it has access to more resources, and you gave that plant all the support it needed, and it got to start growing before this other did. Yeah, but this plant, no one cares about. You're the one that should be caring about the plant. Treat them equally. Let's see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Mike, you and I can go on for days on that topic alone. So that just means we're going to have to have you back. We're just going to have to have you back.
I always want to come back.
Always. We're just going to make this a thing. Before you know it, you're just going to be a co-host again and everything.
Yeah, I'll just slowly osmosis myself back in. Yeah.
I mean, you're already there. You're already on there as co-founder. So, I mean, it's not a lot of editing that needs to be done. So
yeah, like my name is in, the rafters, or, I can just take it down.
That's
like,
right.
What do podcasters have in the rafters? Just like a shirt. I think it's a t-shirt and like pajama pants. That's what I would imagine.
Probably. Yeah. Especially these days. But I mean,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
You've got permanent access to Founding 4 Pod anytime you want it. So don't even worry.
Always happy to come back.
Yeah. Well, it was great catching up again. Her Hockey Counts. We're going to make sure that you have all of the resources, but go to herhockeycounts.com. And please, let's use this. Like, let's make arguments. We're going to get an N double season. We still have to find out what the PWHPA is planning to do. So there's going to be women's hockey, fingers crossed. And of course, college hockey has already started. So let's start normalizing this now because Mike and so many other amazing people are putting this together. And, then eventually, as always happens, us independents, some mainstream group will latch onto this, and then it'll just become the norm. It'd be great if they take us with them, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, I can give a fun little scoopy scoop just for your show is that in the next week or so, every Women's Worlds but 1997 will be on Her Hockey Counts.
Hey.
The reason 1997 won't be there is because I'm still trying to find goalie stats for that one. Mm-hmm. They just apparently they're unicorns and everything is just they're fictional. But
it's like I don't know.
Yeah, and I have some of the stats for that. But that's good. But yeah, it's very fun. Thank you so much for calling attention to it. I always love talking to you, and it was a real pleasure to be here.
Oh. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in and watching my content, following me on social media. If you're not already, well, hey, there's all the stuff. You can find it right there at elindsay08 on Twitter. And please check out her Hockey Counts and, of course, Stathletes. Lots more to come about the importance of analytics. I've talked about it before. I'm going to talk about it some more because 2021 is going to be a breakout season. A lot of great analytics between Stathletes, Mike Murphy, and so many more. I'm excited. The data is important. It might not be my go-to, but I'm an eye test person, but I understand that the data is important. And I'd love to see women's hockey growing in this way. So congratulations to the NWHL and their partnership with Stathletes. And of course, congratulations to my good friend, my co-founder of the Founding Four podcast, and of course, my former co-host, although I'm trying to get him back. Let's work on that. Reel him in, just reel him in. Mike Murphy for his work with Her Hockey Counts. You can find all of the links in the description to this YouTube video. And if you're watching this on the social media, then hey, just check out my link tree and you can find everything there. All right, until the next news break, Erica Lindsay Ayala out. He's the stats man. Okay, bye.
I got it done. That was fantastic. Always love chatting with you.
Yeah, I feel like we could do like 3 more hours.
Oh,
so.
easy.